All right, hello again, everyone. This is Jeff Scott, formerly of Rankin Technical College. And as you know, if you've been watching, I have started my own, where are we? It was here. All right, I've started my own series here. And in this series, there it is. This is my new YouTube channel. Here, JPS Jeff Teaches Programming, and the playlist is Jeff Teaches Programming Python. All right, and I'm right here. This is not the same article that I talked about last time, and I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then afterwards I'm going to pause and then come back and finish. But as it says, this is on editing Python inside of Visual Studio Code. So here is the URL for it. And as you can see, editing Python in Visual Studio Code. Now, Visual Studio Code is an editor. It's not a true IDE or integrated development environment. All right. So they mention here in this overview, we will describe the specific editing features provided by the Python extension, which I've already added, including steps on how to customize these features via user and workspace settings. The first one, IntelliSense, is kind of a nice thing. All right. That said, not everybody is even going to agree with that. All right. What happens is as you start typing, all right, when you're in Visual Studio Code and you start typing, so let's bring up Visual Studio Code here. Probably is going to have what I was working on last time, and it does. All right, so you'll notice right here this line that says print message. And I've shown this before, but if I remove this and come back and put in PR, PR, you'll notice that it brings up print. In fact, it gives everything that's got a P followed by an R, whether the P is followed directly by an R or not. Well, this is print, and that's what I want. So I can either, I think it's space, no, not space bar. I know tab works. All right, and I can do that. It's just a little bit of a shortcut. There are ways that I believe you can come in and turn this off in the editor if you don't want it. All right, so this is the example that they give. When print is typed, notice how IntelliSense populates the autocomplete options. It also gives you a list. As it says, they're provided for all files within the current working folder, and for Python packages that we will talk about at a later time. All right, it says Pylance is the default language server for Python and VS Code, and it's installed alongside the Python extension to provide this IntelliSense features for you. All right, as it says, if you want more on it, you can go out to right here. And if I do that, you'll notice this is the whole thing just on IntelliSense. All right. And there's a section in here. I thought there was one. Yeah, there it is on Python. All right. It says enabling the full set of IntelliSense features by default could end up making your development experience slower. So the Python extension enables just a minimum set. But there's other things that you can turn on. Notice Pylance offers auto import suggestions for modules in your workspace. I would recommend, as it says, these are disabled by default, and I would recommend keeping them off. I'm not going to talk about them anymore. For auto imports, for the custom package locations, etc. Read that stuff, see what you think. All right. The next thing that's discussed in here is GitHub Copilot. Notice GitHub Copilot is an AI-powered code completion tool. All right, it says you can use the GitHub Copilot extension in VS Code to generate code or to learn from the code that it generates. Now, again, all right, people have their own feelings on AI. You know, will AI eventually replace all developers? I don't think so. Will it replace some developers? It already has. But it says there, GitHub Copilot provides suggestions for numerous languages, including Python. All right, and it says if you want to learn more about it, you can go to the Copilot documentation, which, as you can see, Copilot in here. All right, I would suggest watching this 0 to GitHub Copilot Pro in less than 5 minutes. I'm not going to talk any more about that either, and the reason I'm not is the idea behind what I'm trying to get across to people is learning to do this stuff yourselves. All right, ChatGPT, GitHub Copilot, etc. They're great tools, but you've got to have an underlying or an understanding of what's going on under the covers, so to speak. All right, navigation. Now, I'm not going to use these, and the reason is that a lot of these function keys, I am transmitting this presentation right now using Camtasia and TechSmith's Camtasia. Maybe not the best for doing this, but it's the one I'm using, and it doesn't appear to like a lot of the stuff when I hit the function keys. But it says there, if you hit the F12, it jumps from your code into the code that defines the object. Now, if you've ever worked with Visual Studio, not Visual Studio Code, but for example, I taught C# for several years in Visual Studio. And like if you had a button that you had on your screen and you wanted to know more about the button, you could hit the F1 key. Here it's F12. All right, then there's peak definition. It says it's similar, but displays the definition directly in the editor. All right. There's go to declaration, which jumps to the point at which it's declared in your code, and peak declaration. Similar again, but it displays the declaration directly in the editor. All right. Quick fixes. Add import. It says there when you use Pylance, the add import quick fix allows you to quickly complete import statements for modules that are installed in your environment. Again, these are shortcuts. So notice that if you type in the word path, for example, you can choose one or more of these. And that's what they're telling you in here. Again, I don't want to sit and read to you. They mentioned there it displays the top 3, probably the ones you'd be most apt to use. All right. So again, by default, it shows the top 3, but if you don't like those, you can use the search for additional import matches quick fix to find even more. Spelling. Pylance, as it says, displays the change spelling quick fix on unresolved variables or missing imports. So I tend to be a quick typist. I'm actually a good speller, but I'm a very fast typist. So a lot of times I mess up. So these are just things that you can use. It'll give you suggestions, all right, for what it thinks your problem or problems may be. As mentioned here, for user symbols, it'll suggest the imports only from the files where they're defined. All right, note for symbols coming in from installed packages, the site packages folder. All right, only those defined are suggested, but you can do customization again. Refactoring. The Python extension adds refactoring methods. What is refactoring? Well, a lot of times what happens is you start writing a very small Python program, and you might not have any functions in it at all. If you don't know what a function is, you will later on in the course. All right? But you might decide that either you don't have functions and you want to create them, or you've got a function and that function is actually too big. So you can refactor your code, and basically when you refactor it, what you can do is you can let Python know that, hey, I want to break this maybe one function into a group of functions or something like that. All right. So notice what it has there. It's got extract variable, extract method, rename module, move symbol. etc. So there's a lot of different things. Now, I'm going to very quickly look at those, but I'm not going to go over any of this. The reason I'm not is you learn this by doing. You have to do this stuff. All right, if you want to learn extract variable, extract method, etc., it says you can invoke this by selecting a line of code you wish to extract as a variable, then select the light bulb that is shown with it. All right, do the same thing with methods. You can rename modules. This is kind of nice, but this, in my opinion at least, is more a, well, it's a Visual Studio type of thing. As it says, after a Python file or module is renamed, Python can find all instances of it for you. So you can select the apply factoring or the discard factoring as you see fit. All right. Pylance offers a couple code actions, as it says, to simplify the process of moving symbols to different files. Read that at your leisure. In Python, abstract classes serve as blueprints for other classes if you've never worked before with object-oriented programming. That doesn't make any sense. But to very quickly mention, let's say that I create a class that's called animal. And underneath that class, I create some other classes, maybe a dog class and a cat class and a bird class. Actually, the animal class would be set up as an abstract class. I could put in there things that all animals have in common, but I wouldn't be instantiating or creating an instance of an animal class because it's too generic in nature. If that makes absolutely no sense to you, later on in this, we're going to get into object-oriented programming and we'll write all sorts of stuff together. All right. Python supports extension methods that implement sort imports functionality. As it says, it can consolidate specific imports from the same module into a single import statement, so it can make your stuff read a little cleaner. All right. This is going to be a very short lecture, I guess a lot shorter than I thought it would be, but you can see that pretty much this ends with a troubleshooting guide, which is pretty nice. All right, so if you have problems, you can look through here to try to resolve them, okay? And they talk about some of the problems in here, how to fix it, etc. Now, I could go through each and every one of these. I could talk about linting, could talk about debugging, etc. But if we do that, we're never going to really get going in here. So, last time I talked about getting started. This time I talked about, editing or using the editor. I did mention in here, there's a thing in here on GitHub Copilot. Notice there's a quick start, a tutorial, and there's a little bit of stuff in here on it. But what I want to do, I'll go back and reread this. And if I think it's worthwhile, I'll talk about this a little bit later on in my next lecture. Otherwise, I want to go on, and I think I've mentioned this to you before, but I want to show you something here before we finish up. So let's see, where are we? Here we are. All right, and this is something I put into ChatGPT. How to learn Python programming from scratch. Learning Python is a rewarding endeavor. Yeah. Here's a structured approach. Number one is understanding the basics. We've talked a little bit about this. The fact that Python is probably the world's most popular language. We've even talked about some of the reasons why that is. It's got a big community. It's got tons of built-in features and functionality. The syntax is pretty simple to understand. From there, we went in and we installed Python on our computer, and I showed you how to do that. We went out to python.org website and did the install. I talked a little bit about IDEs, and again, there's several. There's some that are built in that I haven't even shown you, but I decided to use VS Code for this course, or whatever you want to call it, that I'm creating. So I think it's time that we go in and start to learn the syntax. So what I would like to do in my next lecture, we've already done this one. We've done this simple hello world. All right. But I'd like to talk about variables and data types, basic operators, control flow, and functions. That may be more than one lecture. Now, before we get into variables and data types, I also want to talk about Python keywords. All right, and keywords just basically mean those are words that are designed to be used in the language in a certain way. All right, so we'll talk about those, and I'd found an article a while back, and I will put that article out there, go through that article with you. Then we'll go right into variables and the different data types in here. Talk about some of the arithmetic, comparison, and logical operators. Go through control flow, which is a combination both of selection, which are if-else's, etc., and the different kind of loops that are in here. Then we'll talk about how to write basic functions. That's what I'd like to do next. Again, that may be one lecture, that may be multiple lectures. Then, as it says, go into some of the core concepts. Talk about lists, tuples, dictionaries, and sets. Show you some programmatic examples of each, file input, output, different ways that you can handle errors, including exceptions, and then get into some of the advanced stuff. All right, modules and packages, some object-oriented stuff, etc. This practical application, yeah, well, then that's getting out there quite a ways. All right, practices and projects, etc. But I wanted just to mention, again, going on with this and understanding the basics. What I am going to be doing. All right, we're understanding the basics now, but as we move our way into learn syntax and basics, and we talk about all this stuff, the majority, if not all, of the examples that I'm going to go through, probably for the first half, third to half, whatever it is, of this course, are going to be more console-based. In other words, they're going to look more like this, and you'll run it, and then down here, all right, so you can see again, we get our roll of dice, 5. We run it again, we'll get another roll of dice with probably another number, roll of dice 3. The point is they're not GUI. Eventually we'll get into GUI, graphical user interface programming. There's different ways you can do it. I'm still thinking about how I want to explain that, but we'll worry about that when we get to that point in the class. So again, the next section, so to speak, that I hope to get into is the one right here. So that's where I'll pick it up again next time. Until then.